In July 2009, three US hikers were arrested near the border of Iran and Iraqi Kurdistan. They were arrested by the Iranian guard and they were put in Evin prison in Tehran. Sarah Shourd, Shane Bauer, and Joshua Fatal, three US hikers that they spent more than 1 year in solitary confinement in the prison. Due to the international pressure, all three of them got released finally. Sarah Shourd got released after 14 months and the other two were released in September 2011. We have invited Sarah Shourd on this program to talk about the importance of the international solidarity with the political prisoners in Iran. Just to let you know that this interview is part of the TV program that is presented by the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran. To let you know about Sarah Shourd is an author, prisoners' rights advocate, and international solidarity activist currently based in Oakland, California. She spent 410 days in solitary confinement while held as a political hostage by the Iranian government in 2009 and 2010. Before being captured, Sarah was living in Palestinian refugee camp in Damascus, Syria, working with the Iraqi Student Project. Sarah is writing a book on her experience in prison at the moment, which will be published in 2014. Sarah, thank you for taking part in our program.
Hi, Shiva. It's good to be here.
Thank you. I would like to ask you, obviously, not about your experience in prison, which I'm sure you will write it in detail in your book, and we're waiting to basically read your book, to read about your experience. But I would like to know that in your book that you said it's going to be published in 2014, how do you think your book can give voice to thousands of political prisoners who are in prison, who basically lost their life in prison?
Well, Shiva, what happened to my now husband, Shane Bauer, and my friend Josh Fatal and I is not at all unusual in Iran. As you know, and as Iranians around the world know, the Iranian government is more brutal with its own people even than it is with foreigners. The conditions that we were held under, I was in solitary confinement the entire time for 13 and a half months. And all of us were in very isolated confinement. Shane and Josh got to share a cell together after 4 months, but they had literally little to no contact with the outside world. It was 6 months before I was allowed to call my mother and just to tell her that I was alive. And we were denied phone calls. We weren't allowed to write. So we were all extremely, extremely isolated. But these conditions, although under UN law they constitute psychological torture, the sensory deprivation and the incommunicado detention constitutes white torture or no-touch torture. And all of us experienced that. It's not at all unusual. It's along the spectrum of how the Iranian government routinely treats its own people.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting closer to the 20th of June, the International Day in support of political prisoners in Iran. As you said, as you just mentioned, you have experienced a prison firsthand yourself, and you know what it feels like to be in prison. In your view, what's the importance of having an International Day for political prisoners and for putting pressure on the Iranian government to release all these prisoners?
Well, Shiva, I was held, of course, in Section 209 alongside other political prisoners, and these women, even though I was forbidden to talk to them and I was kept separate from them, we still found ways to reach out to each other and to support each other, and I really experienced such an unbelievably beautiful connection with a lot of the political prisoners that are, and many of them are still there in Section 209. Women would smile at me when they went back by my cell, even underneath their blindfold, they would look into my eyes and smile. Once I was taken to the clinic, and a political prisoner who's no longer in Evin named Hengame Shahidi, we've since been in contact, and when I came into the clinic, the guards told everyone it was forbidden, mamnua. They weren't allowed to talk to me. They weren't allowed to touch me. And she broke past the guard and threw her arms around me. And it was one of the most emotional experiences of the year that I spent at Evin. It still makes me tear up a little bit to think about her bravery. And there were other women. Zahra Bahrami was one of the most courageous women that supported me over the long period of my incarceration. Zahra used to, when she would hear me crying or arguing with the guards, she would yell down the hallway, "I love you, Sarah." Or she found ways to pass me notes, and we learned about each other's lives, and we had planned to meet when we were both free. But Zahra was murdered by the Iranian regime. She was executed for a crime that she most likely didn't commit. There's absolutely no evidence against her. Actually, all evidence points towards the fact that she was used to set an example to other activists and other oppositionists in Iran. She was picked up at the Ashura protests, and later they said they found drugs and other illegal substances in her apartment. And most people believe, and I also believe, that she was framed in order so that they could execute her and set an example. So Zahra Bahrami gave me an incredible gift. She gave me the gift of love and friendship during the worst time of my life, and I'll never ever forget her or my other sisters at 209. There are some women. I never got to meet the lawyer, the human rights lawyer, Nazreen Satudeh, but our time did overlap, and sometimes I wonder if it was her voice that I heard arguing with the guards or standing up or singing songs. The most important thing when you're in prison is not to go limp, to continue to resist your conditions and demand to be respected and treated with dignity. And I learned that from the other women in Section 209. They never stopped fighting their conditions and demanding to be treated with respect and dignity. And that's something that I'll always attribute to those women.
Many people that you were in prison with, and some of them are not among us, unfortunately, like Zahra Bahrami. And on the 20th of June, the International Day in support of political prisoners. Nasrin Sotoudeh and the rest, who probably we don't even know their names.
Well, the most important thing that gives you strength and helps you to fight against the inhumanity of prison and the torture of solitary confinement is to know that you're not forgotten. And it's absolutely amazing the way that the attention on the outside can find its way to prisoners. Sometimes other prisoners would whisper to me, "I saw your mother on television," or your country loves you. And it was extremely emotional and extremely important for us to know that we weren't forgotten. Because when you're not forgotten, that gives you something to live for, it gives you something to fight for. And the political prisoners in Iran need to know that. And I trust that there are ways that this information will get to them, and that information will help keep them strong and keep them help them to continue to believe that what they're doing is making a difference for Iran, for the Iranian people, and that a better day is to come.
I mean, definitely they will know, and I'm sure they will have a chance to listen to your interview and that you're talking about that. And I promise you, we will translate your interview in Farsi for Farsi-speaking audience. I guess my last question is, I would like you to say, I mean, if there are points that you want to mention, definitely, but also continuing my last question is more like in terms of personal level, how did you wish to be supported by people outside of Iran when you were in prison? Because most of the time people, when they contact us, they say, how can we support them? Yes, they're not forgotten, we talk about them. What else, as a former prisoners, what else did you wanted them to do?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shiva. I mean, other than keeping my story alive, I mean, 1 month in prison, I've often heard other people say this, and I think it's the best way to describe it, is that 1 month feels like 1 year. And 13 months, it feels impossible that people are still fighting for you after all that time, that they haven't given up. So that just knowing that is the number one important thing. But outside of that, I was constantly having nightmares and constantly terrified of what would happen to my mother, to my sister, and my family, how they were feeling, how they were holding up. And when I got very, very infrequently, I would receive a letter from a friend, or just really once when I finally got to see my mother when they came to Tehran, that was a huge relief for me to see that she was okay. So for families to be able to continue to take care of themselves and to be able to give the political prisoners the reassurance that they're doing okay on the outside and that they have a whole community that's supporting them. So what people can do is support the families. That's extremely important. And then another thing is just to really represent the political prisoners as who they are, to do research and to understand their lives and understand why they took the actions that they took. There's nothing that I admire more than people that willingly, consciously wake up in the morning, like all of the women that I was in prison next to in 2009. A lot of them came in during the Shourd protests, but they all came in because they in some way stood up or resisted their government. And to take that choice consciously is a very admirable choice, to risk losing everything. And those of us on the outside, we can hold them up by continuing to tell their stories and be very, be very detailed about who they are. Don't generalize. Don't turn them into caricatures. Let them be the human beings that they are and be their voice in any way that you can.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being on our program, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you for having me.